Okay, yeah, 2 points. That was a very good discussion. I wanted to address the speaker at the back who was saying, wouldn't it be more productive, or possibly more honest, if we just thought of this not in terms of it being an outrage, but this is the daily business of capitalism. You may think that's right. I may agree with you. Many people in this room may agree. But actually we risk cutting ourselves off from people who think the idea of a journalist hacking the phone of a murdered schoolgirl so that his newspaper can sell profits, there's nothing normal about that. It is truly disgusting, and we should share and amplify that disgust. What we then go on to do is to say, what are the causes, what are the roots of that? It didn't just happen because that was an individually disgusting journalist or proprietor. That's where we can really start to address many of the questions that all of you have been talking about. And I think that's where it's crucial to think about journalism in a very positive way. I want to come back, my second thing is answering Laurie actually, is that journalism produced for profits, a commercial journalism or a journalism which is utterly part of the state, distorts journalism. You can't have, in general, you can't have a journalism that is going to speak truth to power if it is constrained by all the time the need just to make sure that it gets better ratings or it just serves audiences. Ultimately, it has a different ambition. So what we have to do is really think about how do you get the conditions in place to have a journalism or a wider media that does its job. And I think journalism is an absolutely critical part of the way in which we move forward for democracy. It's not a side issue. So my second one is just in terms of Laura. You were saying, if people don't agree with you, we'll find out in a minute. But if they don't agree with you, you're going to write about shoes. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing wrong with writing about shoes. There's something very wrong with writing about shoes in terms of PR. But who is one of the finest journalists of this generation? Wrote a book called No Logo, that I'm sure many of you know, Naomi Klein, who has done amazing journalism about shoes, because she went over, she talked about how they're made, she talked about exploitation, she brought that into the movement, she was, it was two-way. Now that's a kind of journalism which I'm sure inspired many of us. So it's not about the subject, it is about thinking of being part of a movement, of having the kind of ambitions that journalism should arise from the movement, feed back into it. And I don't think that, that's not like a small, little movement. This is about the concerns of ordinary people, wherever they may be. Commercial and state-run media ultimately try and stop all of this, but we have so many models of a fantastic journalism. The 19th century, without you thinking I'm going to go into a long history lesson, I promise I won't, but there are amazing stories, if you ever wanted to read about them, about a journalism that was part of the unionisation and democratisation of Britain in the 19th century, where ordinary people produced newspapers which were illegal, were smuggled around the country in coffins, in hat boxes, in, not shoe boxes presumably then, but they were smuggled around, they were read, very few people were literate, so one person would do the reading. Now that is a real organic, living kind of radical journalism, because it both emerged from and went back into the movement. It wasn't just a dry politics, it talked about all the issues that affected ordinary people at the time. And we need to update that, modernise that, think of the kinds of things that we need. And obviously, it's not enough just to say that we want just to reform the media. I mean, I'm all in favour of it. I spend my life trying to think of ways in which we can do this. But that is part and parcel of raising our expectations so that we can then think about much broader means of reform. And I think the media is part of that. I think journalists play an absolutely critical role. We should never say all journalists are part of this. Most journalists are stopped from doing the job that they want to do because they have to make profit or they have to serve their paymasters in authority. That's the problem. So it's a question of thinking, drawing your energy, drawing your creativity, drawing your politics from inside the lives of ordinary people and feeding that back. And we have a fantastic tradition, I think, inside the socialist movement for doing that. So please, write about shoes, but in the right way. I'm sure you will.